we've done one of these, but it's going to be very exciting. It's an inspirational grandmother-granddaughter presentation. Resident Mickey Mandel and her granddaughter, Stephanie Erickson, will discuss Mickey's book, Elk Avenue and Other Stories. Stephanie Erickson, will you raise your hand if you're Stephanie? Is she here?
I'm here. Okay, raise your hand.
A California, you can tell I was a teacher. A
Justin
California
and
native
Michael.
has a master's degree in social work and is licensed both in California and Quebec. She's the founder of Erickson Resource Group, a clinical practice focusing on seniors and their families. A family caregiving expert, Stephanie is a regular contributor on Breakfast Television Montreal, as well as other media outlets throughout the United States and Canada. And as a popular television host, has interviewed many accomplished guests. Today she's here with her favorite subject, her grandma, Mickey Mandel.
I hope.
To talk about Elk Avenue and Other Stories, a compilation of her grandmother's memoirs, short stories, and enhanced nursery rhymes, a labor of love for 5 years in the making. Welcome, everybody, to a very special afternoon.
Look at all the people.
I need that microphone.
Yeah, I think so.
Nice.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody.
Yeah. Hi,
It's a full
everyone.
house. You were right.
Yeah, thank you all for coming.
Speak into the mic.
I padded it with family just in case.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Talk louder. Okay,
That's because we're hearing, we can hear you.
I get it.
but
I
most
get
of
it.
us can't.
Can you
No
hear
problem.
me? If somebody can't hear me, just raise your hand, okay?
And we can always turn this microphone up as well if necessary. You guys okay to hear me? No? Alex? Alex, you want to turn it up a bit? Because otherwise I'll be yelling. Then I'll sound really angry.
And nobody wants to see you angry.
Tell me about your book! Thank you, Alex. Hello, hello. All right, I'll try and sit closer as well.
Okay. Okay. I'm here.
Grandma's nervous. Hi, Uncle Freddie. Well, thank you everybody for coming. It's a pleasure and an honor. And we'll see if she's my favorite subject to interview. We'll see how she does. Maybe. Oh, it just went off. Alex, it just went off. Hello, hello. It went off. That's why. It turned off. Hang on. It's on now? Okay. Okay, so hopefully this will be my favorite interview. We'll see. Pressure's on. You still can't hear me. I don't know what else to do. I'm practically licking the microphone.
You know what, honey?
From the mic.
Huh?
Get an inch from the mic.
I am. I don't know what else to say.
You have to take it out and hold it straight out. Straight out. Stuff.
Okay, I still don't think it's going to be any. I don't know what to say. It's all right. So okay. Okay. So yeah, that would help. Has everybody even seen the book? Has anybody seen it? Look at this huge, thick book. How many pages is it, Grandma?
150 something with a lot of pictures. My son was in charge of getting it published, and he put in so many pictures. So
Yeah.
you'll see me at all different ages.
Yeah, and you see her family, and her favorite granddaughter has a photo in there as well. Oh, but she has other and Dana, and Lisa, her
Yeah.
other favorite granddaughter.
I have a lot of granddaughters here today, yeah.
So, Grandma, because people haven't seen the book yet, so why don't you talk a bit about the process of the book? Because I know your writing began, I think, with your creative writing class here. Is that correct?
Actually, I was thinking about it this morning, and I think it began when I was editor of the newsletter, because I was writing an editorial every issue. And that was the first real writing I had done in a long time. And I don't know, I always wanted to be a journalist. When I was like 15, I went to the Cleveland Press and asked for a job, asked the editor for a job as a copy girl, and he laughed me out of the office and said, "There's no such thing. They're only copy boys." So I didn't have a job. I don't know. And then I got into the creative writing group here, where I did a lot of writing for about 3 years or 4 years, and there were a lot of challenges with that. And it was a good group. It's still running. If anybody's interested, Shirley Lazar is in charge. Okay. And that's it. I haven't written anything much for the last year, so I'm waiting for inspiration to strike again.
So that's more in the present when you started writing as an editor for the newsletter and then the creative writing class. But when did your love for words really begin?
I don't know. I was always a reader, and I was editor of my elementary school, the Oliver Wendell Holmes Hourglass, the Empire Junior High School, forgot what it was called, Herald, and the Glenville Torch, and that was fun. And I just kept reading. There was a long period when the kids were growing up when I couldn't read much, but then I was able to get back to it. And now I'm reading a lot, so that's nice. Yeah.
And the book is a compilation of your memoirs and also fictional stories.
Yeah.
And I know at the end there's some nursery rhymes. Now, when you went back and forth with memoirs and the fictional stories, was that because that was the creative writing assignment, or was that something you just enjoyed, writing fiction and your memoirs?
Well, I started out with the memoirs, and then we got challenges, like we were brought in somebody's painting, or a painting that I had in my apartment, to inspire us to make up a story about it, or a newspaper article, and so we did a lot of that. And that's when I wrote the fiction things. And then the nursery rhymes just came to me one day. I was lying in bed, and I don't know, a nursery rhyme popped into my head, and that was fun to do. So I did that for a while. So.
But you've been doing a lot of rhyming for a long time. Mine was Stephanoodle is a poodle, all she does is cock-a-doodle. I've had that one since I was a little kid. So actually, you've been a writer for a very long time. How do you find, what's the difference between the fiction and the memoirs? Was one easier than the other?
I don't know. The memoirs are really, it's not a chronological thing. It's just isolated incidents in my life that I wrote about. And also there's a story about my mother, one about my father, one about my 2 sisters, a favorite cousin, and then things that just happened. And then the fiction started because of the creative writing group. And that I really liked doing that a lot. I lost myself in that a lot. It was a lot of research, and that was good to do.
I find, Grandma, that all of your stories have a hint of romanticism. Even if it's your memoirs or your fictional stories, there's always like these romantic things that happen within. Do you find that that's because you've experienced that, or is it something that you've always longed for?
So I've always longed for it. No, I've had romance in my life, believe me. I don't know. I just like with movies. I tend to like movies that are, and books about families. Mm-hmm. So I really, I don't know how to answer that one.
I didn't mean romantic in that way, but everything is, the way you describe, let's say, a street, there's like a romantic description of the street.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, is everything has this romantic appeal to it.
Yeah, I get real wordy. Yeah.
I didn't say wordy, I said romantic.
I don't say wordy.
And whose idea was it to put it together in a book? It was Uncle Billy's, right?
Yeah, Billy and I talked about it after I had written a lot of stories. My son, who lives in Oakland, had just had surgery, that's why he couldn't be here, is a writer, primarily a poet, and he was in charge of the publishing. And he's the one who got the books. I never expected to be such a big book. But anyhow, that's what it is.
And talk to me about what it was like, that process of going through. Hold it up. It was a hand motion. I'm holding it up. Talk to me about that process of, because you write a story, maybe you set it aside after, of course, sending everybody in the family a copy. We all have copies that came in the mail, which is fantastic. And then when you started going through and actually putting them together, did you realize that you had this whole like body of work? Were you surprised when you saw how much you had done?
Yes, I was very surprised. And also, I've been keeping the post office going here with mailing all these stories to my families. I spend a lot of time writing the fiction, the short stories, a lot of editing and re-editing, but anybody who writes knows that's what you have to do. And I really miss writing now, but I can't think of anything to write about. So.
We'll think of something.
Okay.
You can write about this day
Okay.
and what the meaning it had for you. So when you put them all together, what was that like working with Uncle Billy, which is her son?
Yeah.
What was that like going through that process with him?
It was good. He was very patient with me, and he listened to me. If I got stuck with something, I would ask him, and he always helped me. He gave me some suggestions. Some I took, some I didn't take because it didn't sound like me. No, it was really wonderful because we were in very close contact. It took about 4 or 5 months to get it all together, and so I miss that now.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about your stories. In almost, all of your personal stories and even a lot of your fictional stories, there's always a thread of Judaism and rituals and families. So talk to me about the importance of that in your life and how that's reflected in your writings.
Well, I was brought up in an Orthodox home, and a lot of the things I remember, like the feeling of Shabbat from Thursday night on at my house. I've written a story about that. There are pictures in here of my kids with Hanukkah candles when they were very young. What else did I write about with religion? I can't remember. No.
Well,
I write about there's a story about my grandmother. I want to tell you also, I'm donating this book to the Fountainview Library, but I'm going to keep it in my apartment. And if anybody wants to borrow it, they can borrow it. I will be glad to lend it to them. Okay,
So,
thank you.
underlying that is now you're all obligated because she will know who reads it or not. It's just her way of keeping track, making sure everyone's engaged.
Okay.
You also talk a lot in your fictional stories, but also in your memoirs about the traveling. So going to Europe and, translating in Baja. That's her story where she went down to Baja and translated. So although you talk a lot about not having adventures in your life or feeling like you write about it, it seems like you were very, very adventurous. But that's not how you describe yourself.
No, I don't describe myself that way. But I guess I have the Baja story I read here once.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I guess that was the beginning of my emancipation. So I don't know. And the story about Rome that's in here, the beginning is true. The back part of it is fictional. So.
The enhanced version. See, there's a romantic piece. See, then it becomes romantic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talk to me about your mom a bit. She writes a lot about her mother. I'll get into some of the details, but just describe her.
Oh, my mother was she was the quintessential Yiddish mama. She never learned to speak English. The only writing she could do was she signed her name. She could write Lena Arnoff. She was sort of my child when I got older. When we would go shopping, I would lead her across the street and I would stay with her. She was never really at home in America. She was sick a lot, and I don't know, I feel incredibly grateful that I had the parents that I had, because they made me what I am, and I really like what I am most of the time. So.
I think. Where was she from?
Lithuania.
Where?
Lithuania.
So I want to talk about your mom a bit more, but let me get to something you just said. You said that you felt that you became, like she became your child, you were helping her. Do you feel that way now, that there's been a switch where your children are now taking on that role for you?
Actually, my children are now bossing me around. Yeah, you know, I depend on my kids a lot, and I'm very thankful for them, and you know, everybody knocks themselves out. And I'm really happy that I'm this old and that I've gotten to the point where I can see a lot more simchas with the kids, and you know, more great grandchildren coming up, and a great grandson at college, and two great grandsons, no, three great grandsons at college. I don't know. I run out of words.
Okay. So let's get back to your mom. We know, well, many of you may not know, but Mickey's mom struggled with mental health. Sorry, Mickey's mom struggled a lot with mental health. My mouth is on it. I don't know what to say. Her mother struggled a lot with mental health. And you watched some disturbing and saddening situations with your mother and her struggles with mental health. How do you think that impacted you as a child and then now as an adult?
Oh, it was very traumatic for me. I still remember 2 or 3 incidences very clearly. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to do this to my children, make them worry the way I worried about my mother. But, you know, she never got to see my 2 younger children, which was sad. I don't know what else. Every time I light candles every Friday night with the candlesticks that she used, which her mother had brought from Lithuania. Of course, you know.
You know what? Finish your thought. Of course, what about the candlesticks?
I don't know. I try to be the kind of mother to my children that my mother was to me. You know, I still have in my head, I can still hear her saying, "Mary, mein Kind." You know, so I'm going to cry, so don't ask me anymore.
Okay, so we'll move away from that then. Okay, so let's talk about another adventure that you had. Your first husband was in the Army, Air Corps of the Army, right? It's called Air Corps of the Army, I guess. And so you traveled a lot, living in different cities as a young woman. But also, you really, prior to that, loved school, was very, very good at school. You had a job at I wrote it down, the Ordnance Division of the War Department, which you absolutely loved.
Yeah.
And then you became an Army wife and then a mom, and so the career kind of, it never happened. Has that been something that you've regretted or wished for a different path? Like, how did you manage that love for school and learning and working and then transitioning to being a wife and a mom?
Well, it was what I really wanted to do. I never resented doing it. There's one story in here about the 6 things that I will never be. Things I dreamt about being, like a prima ballerina, you know. So.
Yeah, there's still time. Yeah, you call that section the well-adjusted hardly. That's that section where she talks about the things that she wishes she did. So what is it like for you now? Because all of your grandchildren, all the women, all of us, Dana here, my sister, myself, all your grandchildren are working mothers. When you see that, do you feel like our generation is missing out because we're not as in motherhood, or do you envy that? Like, how do you see that difference?
Well, actually, I was worried about it, but they're working and they're running a house and they're mothers. and their wives, and they have careers, and they're doing it all, and they're doing it all very well. And I'm really proud of all of them. I don't know how these young kids do it.
Wine, a lot of wine. Yeah.
Could I ask how old she is and how old were you when you married? Or is that too personal?
For Mickey,
Yes.
how old are you and how old were you when you got married?
I'll be 96 in August, so I'm 95 and a half. And I got married for the first time when I was 19, a year out of high school. And we were divorced after 32 years, and a year and a half later, I had a wonderful second marriage for 26 years. And that's really when I felt liberated, I think, for various reasons.
Felt liberated. You mean like emotionally?
Yeah, when we used, my husband and I belonged, my second husband and I belonged to the Vanguards, which was a support group for the Jewish home. And when they would honor me or call me out to speak, I would be hiding in the kitchen. And my husband would have to come and pull me out. But I don't hide in the kitchen anymore. So.
You don't have a kitchen.
I do too. I have a kitchen.
I know that you want to read a story, so I do have more questions. Why don't we stop and have you read a story, and then we'll go
Okay.
back to some questions.
Okay. Let me see what page I'm going to. This one is called The Girl in the Closet, and it was inspired by a friend of mine who is not here, who believes in the supernatural. And she told me one day a few years ago that when she's in her bedroom, every once in a while, she sees a little girl run into her closet, and she just ignores her, and the little girl keeps coming back. So this is all fiction. The first time I saw her, it was nearly midnight on a Saturday almost 40 years ago. I had come home from an evening out with several old friends and had gone up to my bedroom to prepare for bed. We had had dinner and then gone on to a trendy new bar, which one of the ladies had recently heard about. The conversation went from laughter as we reminisced about all our years together to teary confidences as the evening wore on. One bottle of wine led to another and then another. By the time the cab dropped me off at my front door, I was feeling very sentimental and sad about the passage of time since we had all last been together. My head was still buzzing from the effects of the 4 glasses of wine I drank earlier that evening. Inside my house, as I climbed the half-dozen stairs to my loft, I felt a faint breeze coming from my room and wondered if I had left the window open. I entered, thinking how welcome the bed looked, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a young girl pass through the closed closet door and disappear inside. Startled, I shouted, "Hey, wait!" But she had disappeared. God, I really must have overdone the alcohol tonight, flashed through my mind. How weird. Wait until I tell the girls about this tomorrow. 10 minutes later, I pulled the covers up to my chin, vowing never to drink that much again in one evening. I fell asleep quickly, but had a restless night, one disturbing dream after the other until morning. When I awakened, I tried in vain to recall those dreams, but like the little girl in my closet, they too had vanished. The next day was a busy one at the office. I felt out of focus, but attributed that to an incipient hangover. I went home immediately after work, made myself an omelet, had a cup of tea and a graham cracker, and watched an hour of a bad crime movie. By the time I went upstairs, it was nearly 10 o'clock. Again, I was aware of a cool breeze coming from my bedroom as I rounded the top of the staircase. I know I didn't leave the window open. I entered the room just in time to see the same young girl standing in front of my closet. But tonight she hesitated just long enough to smile shyly at me as she passed through the closed door, and then she was gone. I had seen her clearly that night. She looked to be about 12 years old, small and slightly built, with a pretty elfin face. Her clothes were of another time, a dark-colored short pleated skirt, white long-sleeved shirt, knee-high dark stockings, and a red beret partially covering auburn curls. When I tried to picture her in my mind later that evening, I realized that her shirt was what I had heard my mother once refer to as a midi. It had a wide sailor collar with a red scarf tucked under it, the ends of the scarf hanging down the front. And I remember, too, her hat was the kind that Mama used to call a tammy. That night was crowded with dreams again. This time, I remembered them when I awakened. They were vague, but real enough that they had stayed in my subconscious mind. There were suitcases, a succession of old boxcars on a railroad siding, tall iron gates opening and then closing, scores of people, men and women, many of them elderly and children, packed together in a dark space. I couldn't shake those images that entire day and evening at home. They kept going round and around in my mind like a disturbing movie that I couldn't turn off. Weeks passed and I kept waiting for my phantom visitor to return, but I never saw her again. I thought about her every night as I climbed the stairs to my loft. I knew by then that she wasn't a product of my imagination, that she had played some part in my life, that I had seen her somewhere before. A few years later, my firm transferred me to their offices in another state. It was a promotion, and I was looking forward to the change. I began the process of organizing my belongings for the move. One afternoon, high on a shelf in my bedroom closet, I found my mother's old photo albums. We had gone through them together during the last few weeks of her life, several weeks before she died. By then, she was already bedridden, so I would sit on the edge of her bed day after day while she told me about the photos, who the people were, where the photos were taken, and when. "You should know these things, my kin," she said. "This is your family. This was my life." I opened the album on my lap, and suddenly there she was. The little girl in the pleated skirt, the midi, the red tam, my Tante Rochel. Mama told me that afternoon how she remembered her father taking the photograph in front of the family's small brick house in Berlin as they were preparing to leave for Rochel's first recital. She was a tante I never knew. She had been 12 years old. The year was 1939.
I love it. So good. You can see why we drink wine. That's an amazing story, Grandma. Mom was saying, oh, it's just giving her goosebumps thinking about it. Amazing writer, drawn right into the story. So talk to me a bit, Grandma. I want to talk about getting older. I guess you guys probably heard in the beginning, I work with seniors myself. That's my job. And so I hear about all of the challenges and the way that people feel in the psychological process of aging. You've talked to me a lot about feeling irrelevant and unnecessary as you're aging. Did the process of writing the book make you feel more connected? Did that help at all with that?
Well, it made me, what can I say? I felt very fulfilled when I was writing. I think we probably all have the same feelings. Sometimes you're with, sometimes your own family, and it's as if you're not there. They're talking among themselves about their own things, and you're just sitting there. And half the time I can't hear it anyhow. It did, yeah.
Who did you do this for?
I did it for my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren. And back, here's the whole group of them here. There are a lot of pictures which my son inserted.
And the stories, your memoirs, and thinking about these, and some of the stories I had heard before that you wrote about because you share them with us, which is fantastic. Putting them down on paper, did it help to solidify memories? Were you surprised at the details?
Yes, it did. Even today, I got an email this morning from one of my granddaughters who lives in Switzerland, and she had given me a little plant she brought, a little present the last time she came, and it's sprouting now, and I let her know about it, and it was from Amsterdam, and it started me thinking about Amsterdam, and all of a sudden I remembered more things that happened during that trip while we were there, things I wanted to remember. Yeah.
Well, now you have inspiration.
I have inspiration.
And I'm curious about a plant from Amsterdam. What plant that is?
It's actually it's forget. Oh, no, it's not. It's forget-me-nots.
Okay, forget me not.
Not my grandchildren. Yeah. Okay.
What are you surprised about in going through the process of compiling the book, revisiting the stories that you've written? What surprised you about yourself or the process?
It surprised me that I ever wrote them. I'm still I can't believe that I wrote everything in this book. It's you'll see whoever's in the writing group, you'll see the stories just pile up. Yeah. So, no.
Did you learn anything about yourself that you did not know in going through this process?
I'm going to sound very, very conceited, but I learned that I'm a pretty good writer, and that I can really remember a lot of things, not so much from yesterday, but from back another time. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the same.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
You're not sounding conceited. I told you this on Friday.
Yeah.
When we are proud of our accomplishments, it doesn't mean we're bragging or we're conceited. We can be proud of our accomplishments. It's okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't put yourself down.
Okay.
Now, what would you say to others about the documenting of stories and maybe the cathartic experience?
Well, just start writing. Just take an isolated incident, and write about it, and you'll find as you're writing, more will come to your mind, and then you sort of get on a high, and if you're lucky, you keep on. So, but we're all in the same boat, all of us here. So
we're going to read some of the nursery rhymes as well. So, Grandma, why don't you do that?
okay. The first part of all of these is the real nursery rhyme. Then I added a stanza or two. I wrote about 20 of them, I think. Little boy blue, come blow your horn. The sheep are in the meadow and the cows are in the corn. Where's the little boy who tends the sheep? He's down in the meadow, fast asleep. Wake him, for he has a plane to catch. His long-held dream is about to hatch. He's off to Paris, a great gig at last, where his horn and he will be having a blast. Playing nightly at the Folies Bergère, where the music's hot and the showgirls are bare. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children she didn't know what to do. So she gave them some broth with plenty of bread, kissed them all soundly, and put them to bed. Then she sat down in her lazy boy recliner, dialed the number of old Charlie's diner, ordered a burger with fries, a chocolate milkshake, and an extra large slice of the coconut cake. The boy delivered her order in just 15 minutes. She quickly opened the bag and set out what was in it. But before she could take even one bite, The children's door flew open, and on came the light. And 5 boys and 5 girls, tired of broth and some bread, devoured her supper and ran back to bed. For this greedy old woman, this mother of 10, there was only one thing to do. So sadly then she brought out a spoon and a bowl that was red and sat down to a supper of broth and some bread. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet eating her curds and whey. Along came a spider and sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. Little Miss Muffet jumped up from her tuffet and climbed a tall stack of hay. When she got near the top, she decided to stop, looked down at the ground and cried, "Oy vey!" And then this one last thing is a nursery rhyme. I hope they never ration dancing and passion. If they did, I fear the world would collapse. With no kissing, no hugging, no jitterbugging, and of course, no sitting on laps. That's it. Okay.
I just want to ask you one more thing. Mickey was talking earlier about the little quirks, like the adjusted,
Yeah.
well adjusted hardly section, and in there you talk about some of your quirks. So if you guys know her, she never sits still. She always has to be busy. You have to chase. If you want to have a conversation, have your running shoes on because you have to go around the house with her. But when I was reading that part of your book, it doesn't sound like you're kind of like embracing and accepting your quirks. I mean, have you like accepted who you are at this point?
Yeah, I'm trying to. I mean, I'm never going to change. I know that. So,
But we don't want you to change.
okay.
I was told there's supposed to be a question period. Does anybody have any questions about any of the writings? Yeah.
I was wondering how many children, how many grandchildren, and how many great-grandchildren.
I have 4 children, 2 stepchildren, 4 grandchildren, a bunch of step grandchildren I can't even remember, and 4 great grandchildren, 6 great grandchildren,
No,
And-
more.
more
7, 8 great grandchildren.
8 great grand. I don't know. It's a lot of them anyhow. So I'm always calling them by the name that isn't their name.
No, not true. You know all of our names. The question was how many kids and stuff, but obviously you got it. Yeah.
It's very impressive that some of the great-grandchildren are in college at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She was saying she's impressed that some of the great grandchildren are in college.
Oh my.
Yeah. You were going to ask
A
something?
couple of questions. What was the most advanced schooling that she had, and also who's on the cover of the book?
The question was, how far advanced did you go in school? What's your highest degree?
Yeah, no, I just graduated from high school. And then when the kids were younger, I signed up at Santa Monica City College to take philosophy, Greek philosophy, which was the wrong thing. And I really loved the studying and everything, but the day of the test, I decided I was sick because I was really afraid to do it, and that was the end of it. So.
Okay. She didn't just graduate high school. You say, I graduated high school. There's not a just. Do not minimize that.
I graduated high school.
There you go.
Okay.
And on the cover of the book, the other question was, who's on the cover? That's Mickey's dad. And Mickey, how old were you there?
About 4, I think.
My son's Jewish name, he's named after your dad.
You know.
Yes.
What does your name come from? I mean, were you born and named Mickey?
I can hear it.
Where did your name come from? Were you born and named Mickey?
No, I was born Miriam Jenny Arnoff. And before I was born, my mother had a daughter 5 years before I was born. And then 3